This is Sportswatch on Six News. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. That's Lock Sheriff. That's Tin You In. Huge episode this week and a lot going on. We've, of course, just been a few hours ago, the Socceroos officially qualified for the World Cup, which we'll get into in a second. But it's a story I want to start with out of the AFL that was reported in the Western Australian last night. And they're talking about the Gold Coast CEO, Mark Evans' grand plan for more games in Perth, with talk of an in-season AFL tournament that could to kind of even up AFL travel. We know how much the WA teams have to travel. That's kind of the reality of being in this national competition. They're also talking about a fixture overhaul. What is interesting is that the Dockers and the Eagles, they do have 13 matches in WA this season, thanks to North Melbourne playing back-to-back home games in WA because they sold off a few of their games. Shezza, I'll start with you. You know, we hear look, justified or not, they are complaints from these WA teams regarding the fixture. Would an in-season tournament, do it for you? Would that, be a workaround?
I mean, look, I am obviously very aware of the complaints that West Coast and Fremantle have with travel. I know they do get stitched over sometimes. Even with the Shams and Bunbury this year, they are still travelling a lot down to Melbourne for games. I am aware of that. I don't really understand how an in-season tournament, to me, an in-season tournament is just more games, which is just going to add more toll onto the players. Even if the Fur and Eagles players aren't getting on planes to travel, they're still playing in these, in-season tournament games, which is only going to make them more tired. So while I understand the idea, I'm not necessarily a fan of an in-season tournament in the AFL because, it's a physical game. There's a pretty high contact game where the players are already working hard enough, playing, 23 games plus the finals. I don't think an in-season tournament helps that. I think it only hurts it.
The rest of the report from the West Australian, Evans was proposing a tournament in Perth, tournament in southeast Queensland, a tournament in Darwin. Could do multiple tournaments, groups of teams. So you kind of imagine conferences in that kind of area. Maybe 666. There's 18 teams. That of course is not going to last long with Tasmania, mind you. Obviously, you've got the NBA's in-season tournament as well. It's not the first time we've seen this proposed. Tin, again, really could this keep these WA clubs happy? Because I don't think it's unjustified to say that the fixture is a bit unfair, but I do think it is just reality.
I mean, yeah, I don't disagree with the complaints that most of the WA teams put up. Of course, I mean, playing in a national competition, there's always going to be travel, and in a country like Australia, obviously that travel is going to be much longer for some people, and in much more larger amounts for other states and other teams, and that's just the reality of Australian sporting competitions. But look, an in-season tournament sort of thing I think it'd be an interesting format to sort of trial out. I think I'm receptive to it. I think it could potentially offer some sort of interest, especially in June and May, especially those middle rounds of the season. But I think it's an interesting way to sort of alleviate travel pressures for a lot of the non-Victorian and non-East Coast teams, say Perth and even the Adelaide teams. And I think it's an interesting concept, and it's one that's probably worth trialing, especially in terms of sort of getting rid of that sort of the travel barrier that currently exists now.
Do we have time in the season though for it? I mean, we're already starting the regular home and away season, as early as possible, right? It's been pushed earlier and earlier. The grand final is regularly an October thing. And look, of course, you have clubs playing each other twice. I think I don't agree with scrapping the kind of double ups because those games, they're marquee games, right? They make sense to have twice a year. I just struggle to see where it could be slotted in though.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't understand where we would get the time from. We've extended the regular season by another game. You've now got 24 instead of 23. They're very persistent on opening round with half teams playing one week, half teams playing the next week. There's teams have multiple bars of season now. You have the break between the finals. It's too long. The season is just simply too long. I don't understand where you squeeze an in-season tournament into this. Either you play it in, look, firstly, they could play it in February, which isn't an in-season tournament, but that would probably be their best bet. if they do want to try and make it in season, then you probably end up having, teams playing twice a week, teams playing on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, which is what we saw in 2020 with the COVID hubs. And we all know the football in 2020 was a bit of a lower standard just because these players were playing so much, so frequently. So I'm really against an in-season tournament. I don't see where it fits into our calendar, and I can't imagine it's going to make the football any better. So no, I'm strongly against it.
Tin, quickly, you agree?
I'm sort of I'm probably not as strongly against it as Lachlan is. I think like I said, I'm open to the idea. I think where it could work is sort of similar to what the NBA does, where they already count for regular season games. They just happen to have an extra something about it. But yeah, I mean, look, I agree with the time constraint thing. Is obviously, of course, the AFL season's already extremely pushed for time. They're trying to fit in more games, and of course, the last thing we need is a further lowering standard of the game at the moment. But look, whether they decide to go ahead with it or not, I think there is an opportunity for it to work, but it would require a lot of tweaking, and the formatting would have to be close to perfect for it to really be a true success.
Yeah, all right. We'll wait and see closely there. Meanwhile, just a few hours before we started recording, the Socceroos officially qualifying for the 2026 World Cup. It was not that surprising at the end of it. Saudi Arabia essentially needed a 5-0 win to get in. It was a bit of a jump scare at the start. They got the first goal quickly back, and then Australia was able to win 2-1. A pretty decisive performance in the end, wouldn't you say, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty good performance. Obviously, Saudi Arabia came out with the guns blasting as they absolutely needed to. In the end, I mean, it's just another classic Australian performance, I think. Obviously, it wasn't pretty. It got pretty close in the end. Of course, you'll look at the penalty that got conceded in the 80th there, somewhere around there. Obviously, a lot closer than maybe some people would have liked, but in the end, I mean, it's just a very good, solid result. And in the end, yeah, you won't have any complaints about it. It's a good win, and now that we're into the World Cup, I mean, all focus just goes ahead to prepare for that tournament. And I think we'll be looking forward to seeing how that goes and seeing the preparations that go up into it.
Shez, I don't think that even the most diehard, Socceroos ultras would have liked that performance against Japan the other day. A win's a win at the end of the day. It was not, it was the last possible second. It was a very scrappy game. It was a bit of a surprise. But again, a win's a win there. Looking at the kind of that performance as well, because we know the kind of quality that Japan, for instance, as a nation can bring in. Are we, at least close to ready for 2026 when we're going to be facing, a lot more nations? And obviously, we it's not unrealistic to say we have a chance of going deep into the World Cup anyway. We saw in 2022 with the performance that was able to inspire. Are we in a position where we should be confident enough going into 2026 that we're like, no, we're not going to be out at the first possible chance?
Look, I'll go back and forth on it. I think on one hand, you can say that the football we've had ever since Popovic has come in hasn't been exciting. That's a fair enough critique. On the other hand, I think the main goal was, after Graham Arnold had kind of ruined us over, I think the goal was to have Popovic come in, steady the ship, and get us into the World Cup, which he did. Well done to him. The Japan game, yeah, dead rubber for them, against a team who need to win it all at home, and we only get a 1-0 win in the last seconds. Not great, but again, you take the 3 points against a team like Japan. Saudi Arabia, again, not a perfect performance this morning, but 6 points from 6 in your last 2 games against the 2 best teams in your group, you take it. So while not the best results, I still think you can look at that and you can say, okay, we beat Japan, we beat Saudi Arabia, we'll take that on, we'll move forward with it. There's going to be a lot more games upcoming until the World Cup. I believe we'll have the Soccer Ashes, for example. I believe that's looking September, so that'll be a good test against New Zealand. We'll also win the World Cup. I'm sure we'll have a lot more friendlies against other World Cup teams going into the World Cup in the USA in 2026 in order to prepare. Because like you said, we made it out of the group in 2022 when no one expected us to. So I don't see why we can't do that again in 2026. I'm not fully sold, but I do think there's definitely a good possibility we can make it out.
Go all the way, I reckon. Just push for it. As crazy it might sound, when we're there, we're playing I don't know, Argentina or something. I look forward to that. Of course, you got to be optimistic with these kind of things, don't you, Tim? You gotta, at the at the global stage, put every effort behind it. And Football Australia and their I think it might have been a media release or it might have been a match report earlier this morning. I think also they were right to put out. It's a very exciting time for Australian football, with of course the Australian Championship coming in. With of course they mentioned the AFC Women's Asia Cup next year, which is being hosted in WA, Queensland, and New South Wales as well. We saw in terms of fan engagement, Matildas, of course, in 2023. There was elements of that in 2022 with the Socceroos, of course. But you think now, Tim, now is the time where you can really get the nation getting around them and then continuing to get around the round ball game.
I mean, yeah, it's felt like ever since, 2023, maybe 2022, it's felt like football has started to build some momentum again and again. Obviously, you look at, of course, we just had a sold out Melbourne Derby A-League Grand Final as well. We've got the Australian Championship on the horizon. Again, that Women's Asian Cup is coming. And of course, arguably the showpiece event of them all, the 2026 World Cup, which is, again, going to be an extremely friendly time zone for us, which is a huge thing, of course. It's exciting times to be an Australian football fan, and the Australian football community, we know how it is. There's always been a lot of negativity, a lot of pessimism. It's always about, oh, this could happen, that could happen. But I think what needs to happen now is we need to sort of get out of that pessimistic mentality and sort of start thinking, okay, this is where we've been, this is where it can go, because realistically, the game has gone so far. In the past 20 years, we went from one World Cup appearance to this is now our seventh World Cup appearance. This is our sixth in a row. We've gone from, a arguably struggling national league to, a national league that's producing, talent and, it's attracting huge world stars as well. We've come so far in 20 years of football. We've come a very long way. And I think what sort of needs to happen now is, we've got to absolutely look at this World Cup and have a real positive mentality coming into it, because we've seen what we can do in 2022. We've seen we've seen the heights the game can reach. We saw that in 2022. We saw that at the Women's World Cup. And I think, now's the time to start believing. And I think more so now, more than ever, is, time to start having some hope in Australian football.
And it's been great, hasn't it, that the Matildas, following the World Cup campaign, they've still got these crowds whenever they're playing in Australia. Every game you see, they're still bringing in these huge crowds, right? The momentum for them hasn't died down. The momentum for the national team, of course, the national team is going to get more eyes on them. It's the World Cup, just like the Olympics. You're going to get the nation's eyes on this at this point. You want them to stay, obviously, and I think, Shezza, that's something that the Matildas have really been able to do. And the Socceroos, again, you would really hope that this is a chance for them to continue to build on the back of things happening at the domestic level as well, which was also, I saw rightly pointed out, so many Socceroos players have come through the A-League.
Yeah, for sure. The A-League has been a great development path for the Socceroos, I think, especially over the last 5 years. I'd say you watch a game, whether it's A-League men's or A-League women's, you watch it, and the kids starting up front for one of the teams is 17, 18, 19 years old. So I think the A-League is definitely becoming more of a youth path, which is great to see. I've been really impressed by some of the teams over the past season, both men's and women's, with the young talent they've developed. As for the fans, I agree. I'd love to see the Socceroos come off the back of this with a strong fan base. You look at the Matildas, who have had an incredible run over the last couple of years since the 2023 World Cup. I don't think the Socceroos have quite hit that after the back of the World Cup. I think the last 5 years, maybe not as much as support for the Socceroos as we'd like. However, you look at that crowd at Opera Stadium on the Japan game, I definitely think there's a bit of hype coming back now for the Socceroos. So for me, it's really important that 2026 World Cup, like Tim said, it's a great time zone for us to be games at probably 10 a.m. in the morning, which is much better than Qatar. So for me, it's really important that everyone gets out, everyone goes down to Fed Square or wherever your local viewing place is and gives some support for the Socceroos, and hopefully we get some real committed fans off the back of this World Cup for 2026 and onwards.
And just quickly also, shares just because we mentioned them, we were out of time last week, but as we were reporting on Six News last week, the Matildas do have a new coach.
Yeah, they do. Joe Montemurro has come in. He has obviously managed a lot of great women's teams in the past. You think of Arsenal, you think of Juventus, most recently Lyon, where he spent a season. He's come to the Matildas. I think it's what we all wanted. You know, you have a coach that good from Australia. You always want him managing your team. So look, I am not happy. I'm not only happy with Montemurro coming in, but also Emily Husband, who just won the championship with the Central Coast Mariners in the ALW. She's now going to be assistant manager of the Matildas, which for me is incredible. That's probably two of the best managers who we've seen in a while. We're now going to come down and help our national team because let's be real. On the pitch, it's been a rough few months, I'd say, for the Matildas. They've had injuries. The She Believes tournament wasn't great, so on, so on. But look, I definitely think we're back on the right track now with Montemurro. I do believe he's the man for the job, and I'm really excited to see what happens because the Argentina results were great, and now we've got a great manager and a great assistant manager. So I reckon this could be the start of something new for the Matildas.
Yeah, and it's also good that out of the past 6 months, of course, that both the national men's and women's teams, any coaching issues have been put to bed. That there's now consistency, which helps for literally any side in any sport in any competition in the world, that you don't have coaching drama. But yeah, that now that's solidified, I think that is a really big help. I want to turn over to the AIHL now. Tin, big signing that's come in from a pretty well-known name for, I guess, any ice hockey fans or even people who might casually watch overseas competitions.
Yeah, so the Melbourne Ice, as reported by Six News a couple of weeks ago, signed David Booth, who famously featured in the NHL in the mid 2000s and early 2010s. Obviously, probably best remembered for the featuring in the 2011 Stanley Cup final for the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, yeah, he's been obviously he's one of the biggest names we've had in a long time to come down to the AIHL. Obviously, the AIHL as a league has improved its standards a lot. We've pulled some great players, but David Booth, arguably one of the biggest in a long time. This weekend, obviously for the IC, had his debut over on the F3 playing for against the Central Coast Rhinos and the Newcastle North Stars. We'll turn our attention to the Central Coast Rhinos game where I mean, it was a 9-2 win for the Ice, which is a dominating win. They've played that way pretty much all year. But I'll make note of David Booth's statistics. I mean, he scored a hat trick on debut. Not just that, but 4 goals, so a double hat trick on debut. I mean, it's an incredible performance for someone I mean, yes, you could say for someone of his age. Obviously, he's probably well past his best playing days, but he's an electrifying player who's come on. He's famously been known for being an exciting, fast skater, a player who just gets shots on net and scores goals. And I think he's come to Melbourne, he's come to Australia, and he's found a spot, he's found a place, and he's absolutely. I mean, based off of that first game, you can't really say anything about it. He's absolutely just torn apart the Rhinos, and we look ahead to their next game on Friday. That big Melbourne derby against the Mustangs, and I think we'll be looking for similar scenes again when they take on their interstate rivals.
Yeah, we should be a good contest, I should say. The current standings, by the way, Ice still at the top, very, very clearly dominant at the moment. They're followed by Brisbane, Perth, the Mustangs, Newcastle, Canberra, Central Coast, and Adelaide. And it was interesting, Sheza, just on what we were chatting about last week regarding the Australian Institute of Sport arena that the Canberra Brave have gotten as well. The AHL put out a statement this week. They were thanking supporters for that. I mean, just looking at more of the pictures that have come in, because we were speaking before it was actually done, right? Looking at the pictures that have come in, I mean, that is just incredible for a crowd. And again, Canberra Brave, they're sitting third from last at this point. But that's something that can really continue to bring in the crowds, continue to grow ice hockey in Australia. And again, we've talked about the North American atmosphere. I think that just really adds to it.
For sure. I mean, I've been so overwhelmed and impressed by what Canberra are doing right now up there in the AIHL. You look at that new stadium. I haven't been, but from what I've seen, the photos, the videos, the atmosphere they're bringing in, it's exactly what we want to see in the AIHL. It's been an incredible support base, and I'm just honestly so blown away because, as I mentioned before, Canberra is a smaller market in terms of sport in the world. They don't have much sport up there. They've got an A-League women's team and an NRL team and their AIHL team. So you go out now to the hockey, you've got a market there which can build, I think can probably grow to maybe one of the biggest markets in the AIHL. Why can't it? Because you're not going up against as much as other cities are. So for me, it's huge for the Braves. They've now got this huge stadium. They can go off the back of this, build a huge support, and maybe even get some more form out on the ice. Because sure, they're not having a great season, but sport can have more twists in a cinnamon roll sometimes. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Brave come up, make the top 4, and play finals. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what happens there.
Dean, we're only just under halfway through the season at the moment. Just quickly from what you've been observing, can anyone beat the ice at this point? I mean, we're talking about a 10-point difference over Brisbane at the moment, and mind you, Brisbane and Perth they're equal on points. Perth just ahead of the Mustangs by 3. 10 points is pretty remarkable at this point. So yeah, halfway through, ice have to be the team to beat.
Yeah, that's probably the right judgment to make. It's been the general judgment most years. The Melbourne Ice have typically been ahead of most of the competition for a long time now. But again, they're not unbeatable. If you have a look at that record, I mean, the 3 losses they have been in overtime. So I mean, realistically, if you push them over to the edge, it's a proven fact by looking at the standings that their record in overtime isn't as good as they would like. So I mean, you look at the derby just a couple of weeks back where they lost to the Mustangs in overtime. You think back to the Rhinos game at the start of the season. Pretty much, I mean, they are by far, still a hockey team that can be beat. But at the moment, yeah, I mean, you look at their results. They've just been putting goals onto the board, and most teams just can't keep up at the moment. And I think that's part of the reason why they're so far ahead. But I mean, yeah, I mean they aren't uncatchable at this point. Again, it'll come to the playoffs as well, and we'll see, whether they're truly built for it. But at the moment, yeah, they're absolutely the team to beat at the moment. They're the team that everyone will be chasing for a good part of the year now, and it's interesting stuff to keep an eye on at the moment. Yeah.
All right, that's Sportswatch for this week. And of course, stay up to date with all the latest sports headlines. Follow 6 News Sport on Instagram. You can catch up with all the previous shows right here on YouTube. And there'll be plenty more next week. So give us your thoughts, give us your feedback. Let us know what sport you're at and you're watching this week. And thanks everyone for tuning in.